I want to just take a moment to ground us in the conversation that we're having here together. And again, just acknowledge that, we're all here because this is something that we all know is important. And we know that the food system that we have here in the US is founded on exploitation and extraction, right? Beginning with land theft and genocide. We just had a few days to really grapple with that, through chattel slavery and the eventual labor laws that purposefully excluded many of the people who work our food system from getting basic protections and getting basic rights, safety, and dignity. And particularly when we look at the meat industry, from factory farm to the supermarket shelf, we know that the harms are egregious, right? That there's extraction and there's exploitation at every point in that chain. And that's true whether we're talking about the animals themselves that are being pumped full of antibiotics and are crammed together, or we're talking about neighboring communities whose water and air are being polluted every day. We know that family farmers are losing their livelihoods, and that working people who work in the meat packing plants and processing centers face some of the most dangerous conditions of any sector in our economy. So we know that we need to completely transform the industry. And we know that the harms that are happening are only possible because of the high levels of concentration in the industry, right? That there's 4 corporations that control the sector, and they're literally writing the rules about it. So we know that any fight that we undertake is going to take all of us, right? It's going to take all of our diverse strengths and resources and relationships and expertise to make the kinds of changes that we need. So you're going to hear from folks who have been doing that work today. And over these last 20 months, we know that COVID-19 has basically revealed to a broader public what workers and farmers and community members have known all along, right? That since March 2020, folks have been organizing alongside each other to get to safety. So over this next period, you're going to hear about some of the tactics that folks have been using. You'll hear personal stories from organizers in the hometowns of giant meatpacking plants. And you'll hear about the power and potential of a new bill that many of us were a part of helping shape. And you'll hear more about what you can do to help make change. So I'm going to introduce our guests, who are all folks that I highly respect and admire, and I'm so grateful to be in community and movement with. So we have today Jose Oliva from the Food Chain Workers Alliance. We have Sonia Singh from Food Chain Workers Alliance. Sorry, Jose, we used to be at Food Chain Workers Alliance, now at Heal Food Alliance. We have Susanna Deli from Food Chain Workers Alliance. We have Brent Newell from Public Justice. We have Axel Fuentes from Rural Community Workers Alliance. And we have Magali Licoli from Venceremos. All brilliant folks who you'll get to hear from. And this conversation is going to be moderated by HEAL's own Marlene Manzo. So I'm going to pass it to you, Marlene, to take it away and take us into this conversation together.
Thanks so much, Navina, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Well, I'm in DC, so afternoon, but I'm sure folks are coming from all over the country. I'm really excited to have everyone here, some experts, and personally, I think I'm really interested in knowing a little bit more about what has been going on these last 20 months, all the organizing that has been going on around COVID. That's just building on decades, if not centuries, of work around workers' protections. So let's get started with a round robin. And I would love to hear from you, Suzanne. And we got about 2 minutes each person. So I will be cueing you all, but please tell me a little bit more about this.
Sure. So, you know what I'm going to do after I speak for a couple of minutes is what I'm going to put in the chat is a link to a report that we published earlier this year on how COVID-19 pandemic has impacted food workers throughout the supply chain, and focuses really on the ways that food workers have organized in response. And we have it in both English and Spanish, and I'll share that in a moment, because I think that will be kind of a very good overview of what the last 20 months has been. I think what I want to say about it is that, number one, we learned that our allies and the larger food system movement really pulled through for us. And I think it speaks to the value of these kinds of alliances that we're part of. Number two, the lesson that kept becoming reinforced is that where workers were organized and had unions or had organized kind of organizations of some kind, they were the most protected. And so for Food Chain Workers Alliance, our mission remains really sort of focusing on building the capacity for food worker organizations to organize locally, whether that be in their workplace or through policy means, by really building the infrastructure of the food worker movement. However, the pandemic moment really did force us to get more engaged in federal policy work than we would have planned a couple of years ago, right? And what that looked like was really a fight to pass OSHA rules that would protect food workers from COVID pandemic and other airborne diseases. And what that also looked like was to oppose the Farm Workforce Modernization Act and call for a true path to legalization for food workers. And while we were able to stop the Farm Worker Modernization Act, we really have not seen any real reforms on a federal level towards either of those categories. That said, we are really happy to have worked with our allies in the introduction of this bill to protect meat processing workers. We think it's an important tool to really highlight what's really going on the ground. We don't really know how far it could really go as a piece of legislation, but we think it's an important tool and sort of an impetus to support worker organizing in the industry. And we want to thank everybody who's been a part of that, including, Heel, Axel Magali's leadership really helped to strengthen it, and Brent and Navina and Jose's leadership in this, and then also, others on the call like UFCW, who we know has really worked to make this bill as strong as possible. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. And because you mentioned Axel, I'm going to pass it on to him to share a little bit more about what's been going on these last 20 months. Please share from your experience.
Thank you. Yes, this last 20 months been kind of difficult, very, very hard, especially for the workers with the COVID-19, and been a challenge actually to organize too, because organizing with COVID has not been easy, especially when we cannot gather, and in many cases having a meetings is actually impossible, or having a big meetings especially. So a lot of the organizing that went during the last 20 minutes, well, last year mostly, it was actually just through by phone, or in some cases just by Zoom, which is really complicated because do not having the face-to-face or contact with people, you lose a lot of the essence of organizing. So it's really hard, but we've been able to do some things, and as you probably, most of you know, and during the last year, we were able to file the lawsuit, which actually brought a lot of the attention to the meat processing plants, and being able to expose a lot of the conditions that the workers are actually being exposed up there. And obviously, this is something that cannot be possible without the help of our big allies, such as Public Justice or Food Chain Workers Alliance. So we've been able to bring things together, and them working also organizing to incentivate, if I can say, or motivate people to get vaccinated here in our communities, which a lot of the numbers actually changed, because at the beginning it was kind of many people saying, oh, Latinos don't want to get vaccinated, and that was something that was we were able to change it. And now the numbers, I can say, in our communities, in local communities, definitely are the Latinos that most of them are vaccinated. So many other organizing things, but unfortunately there is no much time. But yeah, we've been engaged and challenging the COVID-19 situation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Axel. Magali, do you want to add on that? Just sharing some key organizing moments over the last 20 months.
Yes, well, thank you so much for inviting me. And of course, that last 20 months, it's been a roller coaster. You know, we've been like in a hurricane, and Venceremos was launched in October of 2019. So we were building the organization capacity, but then COVID hit. And I remember very clear, you know, that the desperation of workers that knew how risk they were to contract COVID-19. And I remember many workers that are part of Venceremos that have respiratory problems. Many of them already struggle with chemicals. Many of them work shoulder to shoulder. So it was just a moment of like, what is going to happen to us? You know, what are we going to do? So everything, whenever the economy closed down on March of 2020, really, I mean, I've been working directly with workers for 7 years, but the desperation of being in this state of fighting or dying, it was there. And so workers knew that because OSHA just left them abandoned, you know, they felt abandoned by the agencies, that they didn't have any other option but to stand up and fight. So at the point, workers in 5 different plants in the Northwest Arkansas were organizing, taking action. They were walking off the lines. They were signing worker petitions. We were doing actions in solidarity to those workers outside those plants, doing car caravans. And lastly, at the end of 2020, workers from the Georgia's plants went on a strike. You know, over 30 workers walked out their jobs outside and stayed striking all day long. And I think the power of workers, you know, is growing because they feel like there is, right now at the state of what they are, they didn't have any other option but to take direct actions. And so I am really proud to see that the work of Venceremos is really bringing that that space for workers, you know, to organize, to take action, to stand up, because right now I think it's crucial to know that workers must be empowered. Workers must feel free to stand up and fight when nobody else is there to protect them. So
that's so encouraging. Thank you so much, Magali. Really appreciate you offering that perspective. Jose, we would love to hear a little bit more about what you think some of the key organizing moments are over the last 20 months from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining the webinar. Jose Oliva from the Heal Food Alliance. So yeah, even before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we knew that the food system was in crisis, right? Nabina just hinted at some of this, that only about 25% of food workers had access to paid sick leave. Less than 10% of frontline food workers had health insurance at all. And of course, food workers in general have the lowest median wage of any worker in any sector. So, you know, we've probably all heard the adage at this point that the pandemic didn't change conditions, but rather it unveiled existing conditions. And this is especially true, I think, in this country's meatpacking plants. It is really the COVID jungle for a lot of folks. So, you know, when the pandemic hit, we saw massive unemployment in the restaurant industry. According to some estimates, about 70% of restaurant workers lost their jobs. Then farm workers, warehouse workers, and especially workers in the meat packing sector, all were forced to show up to work with little to no protections against this novel virus. Most of the workers already worked in precarious conditions, either because of immigration status or incarceration records. So complaining was not easy, right? What Magali was saying is absolutely true. They were backed into a corner where that was the only choice they had. So an example here in Chicago at a Mars warehouse, several workers became sick. Workers walked out, management retaliated and fired several of them. Now, luckily, they were members of Warehouse Workers for Justice, which is a member of Food Chain Workers Alliance and a member of HEAL. And so they organized a ton of community support, including a petition, a protest around Halloween, and they got a lot of these workers hired back and won a lot of the demands that they had. But it was only because they were backed into this corner, right? So in some ways, what we're seeing right now is really an opportunity, right? And we see this in many sectors, but this is especially true with food system workers. It's an opportunity to organize and to grow our movement bigger. So that's what I would share. I know there's a whole timeline of things that happen that are absolutely amazing, but let me stop there and then we can probably talk a little bit later.
Great, thanks, Jose. And I'm going to pass it to Brent to just share what his thoughts on these last 20 months.
Right on. Thank you. And thanks for everyone who've joined the webinar. You know, reflecting back on the 20 months, it's important for me to share that, you know, my lens is that of a lawyer. And, you know, my organization, our role is to work to empower organizing and narrative shifts. So from my lens, as I look back on those last 20 months of the pandemic, I think what has been one of the most powerful organizing moments is the way that organizations with roots in with workers organized around an emergency temporary standard, which was what OSHA would do in a functioning democracy to protect workers. But what was happening with the Trump administration is that they were aligned with the meatpacking corporations, and they wouldn't protect workers from COVID-19. So worker-based organizations came together and we're pushing this policy to get OSHA to pass this emergency standard to protect workers. And in addition to all the grassroots organizing that you heard happening, there was movement level organizing between organizations, between HEAL and Food Chain Workers Alliance, with other movement allies and across movement sectors, like with environmental groups or farmer-based groups, to support this effort to protect workers. And that was really some of the most important and something that elevated the issue even more by having allies echoing and amplifying the worker-led emergency temporary standard movement.
Awesome. I don't want you to go away quite yet, Brent, because I do have a follow-up question and I would really love you to break down the bill for us a little bit more, especially for folks like me who maybe it's just like brand new, or, you know, you don't have a lot of context of what's going on. Please offer us a little bit more explanation on that.
Yeah, Navina mentioned the bill that HEAL and Food Chain Workers Alliance has been influencing and working to develop over the last several months. It's called the Protecting America's Meatpacking Workers Act of 2021. And the lead sponsor in the Senate is Cory Booker. The lead sponsor in the House is Representative Ro Khanna. And, you know, before I kind of get into describing it, I want to emphasize that the movement power building that I just mentioned kind of help facilitate the ability to participate in and influence the contours of this bill. So the bill has several provisions that will dismantle the manner in which meatpacking corporations exploit farmers, but I'm not going to talk about that part. What I want to talk about are three categories of issues that were very important to HEAL and Food Chain Workers Alliance in getting into this bill. And they break down in 1, prevention of worker exploitation, 2, worker safety standards, and 3, enforcement. So with respect to the first, preventing exploitation, the bill establishes provisions that limit the speed at which the processing line runs to protect workers from injury, and it includes a ban on line speed increases during the COVID-19 pandemic. It creates a fair attendance policy to limit the abuse of what are known as no-fault attendance schemes, where employers assess points against workers for absences. It requires that during inspections, OSHA must ensure compliance with workers' right to use toilet facilities. That's one of the that's a huge problem for workers and they don't have access when they need to use the bathroom. It ensures worker representatives, including worker-based community organizations like the Rural Community Workers Alliance, may accompany OSHA inspectors during an inspection. And it mandates that during a pandemic, these meatpacking corporations have to report the illnesses and deaths from COVID-19 and any other future pandemics. Again, in the second category, the bill requires OSHA to establish safety standards. There are 3 important safety standards here. 1 is an ergonomic standard that would protect workers from repetitive motion injury. The second is a medical standard that would protect workers from delays in medical treatment referrals and ensure that they have access to medical care of the worker's choice. Too often, workers are sidelined into a nurse who doesn't treat their injuries. And this bill would ensure that workers get to see a doctor of their choosing. And finally, an airborne contagion standard, that emergency temporary standard I talked about, that would protect workers from exposure to the novel coronavirus and future airborne contagions. Hopefully, we don't have to experience another pandemic like this in our lifetimes. And finally, enforcement. You know, if we learned one thing during the Trump administration, it is that workers must be empowered to enforce workplace protections and not depend on a government like the Trump administration that was doing nothing but the bidding of the corporations. So this bill would provide enhanced protections for workers from retaliation. It would strengthen existing law that would allow workers to compel OSHA to prevent imminent dangers. And finally, it would allow workers to sue meatpackers for violating any OSHA requirement or the worker protection provisions of the Protecting America Meatpacking Workers Act. The provision provides damages, including punitive damages and attorney's fees and court order protection. So that would allow workers to hold these abusive, extractive corporations accountable.
Great. Thank you so much for all that context. Super, super helpful. I want to know more from Magali and Axel about why this bill is really important. We know that it's imperfect, but we want to know, why you all think that the timing is right for this.
Okay, I think I should go.
Yeah, Magali.
Yeah, so I think for people that really are not familiar, like in the context of where these workers are, where these plants are located, I think it's important to know, like, for example, we are in Arkansas in a right to work state and also a corporate state because we are in the home of Tyson Foods. And the majority of the workers are immigrants, are also Pacific Islanders, and now recent Black workers. And recently we are receiving a lot of refugees that are ended up working in these processing plants. This industry needs vulnerable workers that don't understand the language, that struggle with English, that don't understand the culture, that struggle with understanding the laws, their own rights. But also it's important to know that most of these plants are located in wide rural areas and where many or most of the times or all the time immigrants don't feel welcome, are not welcome because of the anti-immigrant laws, and also in Arkansas, because Tyson is here, there is this huge presence of controlling really the laws, the schools, the nonprofits. You know, they use charity, they use faith to control the community. So often these workers, when I began organizing back in 2013, when I began hearing the stories, it was shocking that me, in a position of privilege, I was not able to even talk about the issues of poultry workers with anyone here because it was a taboo. It was not seen okay to criticize Tyson because these workers have been seen as expendable, as disposable. And so it's very hard for workers to organize, to stand up. And it's true that this company or this industry exploits workers to the point that it humiliates them, dehumanizes them, that many of them struggle to have bathroom breaks. And it's just not only about the pandemic that workers are getting sick and dying, it also the working conditions that keep exposing them to injuries. You know, right now, even though Tyson praises that they have all the workers vaccinated, it's just not that. Workers still are struggling with bathroom breaks. They are struggling with overall breaks, with a living wage. And right now, because of the labor shortage, less workers are still doing the job of many workers because the company is not decreasing the expected quota. And so right now, and I'm not lying, everyday workers call me desperate because they are tired, they are exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically. They don't know what to do. They are really struggling to survive. And so I think that the importance of this bill is to really bring that awareness, because before the COVID, nobody really wanted to pay attention to these workers. I mean, I was organizing back then, and it was a struggle to even talk about poultry workers because nobody really knew how bad it was. And so I think that right now with these bills, with this conversation, it's so important to acknowledge the state at where these workers are, because they are in a state of surviving. They are at the point of, like they don't know if quitting and dying because they don't have any more food to feed their families, or dying in their jobs. And with this context, it just makes it really hard to speak up. And so that's why our work has been very important, and is bringing the power of the workers, because when they see the work of Venceremos and workers with Venceremos standing up, it gives them hope. When they see that people are talking about this at this level, it brings them hope. And so, yeah, I think that this conversation is just the beginning. And so we hope that in the future or near future, things can change, because these workers are humans. These workers have families. These workers have been nonstop during the pandemic, working to feed the whole nation and the world. And so they deserve to be treated with dignity, and they deserve to be treated as humans. Thank you.
That was so powerful, Magali. Thank you so much for sharing that. Axel, you have anything you want to add to that? Why this bill is so important right now?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think all I have to say is just a few more words, because I totally agree with all that Magali said. You know, but before starting, something that I think is very, very important is that workers are really grateful for this bill. In my conversation with workers regarding this bill, just in the past days, I actually got a comment from Carlos, a worker that been there for a while in this plant in Milan, and he said, well, thank you so much, because finally we can see that someone is doing something in the legislation, because we've been unprotected for all this time for many years. And they said, hopefully, this bill can actually move forward and pass, because that's what we need. As Magali said, in many cases, in most of the cases, actually, workers are totally unprotected, and yes, they are having problems to the bathrooms, problems getting injured. But when it's a time when they want to address those situations, there is not much in the laws where they can feel really supported or really empowered to do it. Like saying, well, we don't feel like there is much support. What if we do this? And regarding enforcement, for example, when it's a bathroom breaks, they say, well, we organize up here, but legally, we don't have much that can protect us. So I can say that workers are feeling really grateful for this, for this bill, and really exciting also that is moving forward. Just in our meetings just a few days ago, when we were talking about this bill, I also say I also hear workers that they say, well, may not be in the best language or the things as we need, because in many cases they say, well, it's like having a really nice car, but we just don't know how to read. And they say, we don't know much about legal things, but right now is the amazing thing that is happening for us if this bill actually move forward, because we are going to feel like there is going to be something legally that can actually protect us from this exploitation, something that can protect us from our injuries. So if we, in the future, if this bill moves forward or gets passed, they are feeling like they are going to have finally something to regulate ergonomic problems that they are having, injuries. Somehow they are going to be able probably to file a complaint if they are not being allowed to go to the bathroom, because at this point, what the institution's been doing is just allowing the companies just as a suggestion, but not an enforceable thing. So they feel, yes, the companies all the time say, yeah, we have an ergonomic program, but when they actually implement it, there is no one actually enforcing that for ergonomic things. Same thing for the bathrooms. The companies all the time say, yeah, we are giving you guys time to go to the bathroom. Yes, but it's on a schedule, but not when we need it. So on this bill, I think it is addressing that situation and those issues that the workers are facing. But it's not also limited. What I can see is not also limited to the meat processing plant workers, but also for farmers too. So the things that actually gets to address the things that is being needed for workers and other people in the community too. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you. That was super. It was great to hear from all of you and learning so much, and just really grateful for all of your work. I want to pass it on right now to Suzanne to share a little bit more, like, what can we do to support this bill? How can folks get involved?
I'm going to ask my colleague Sonia to answer that.
Thanks, Suzanne. And thank you so much, Magali and Axel, for those incredibly powerful words and testimony and the amazing organizing that you're doing on the ground every day. And I think that that's what we see the opportunity for action moving forward, is how to use a bill like this to continue to make visible that organizing that has been happening, the conditions that workers have been naming for many years, but now there's a momentum or opportunity, and to have a framework, as Axel mentioned, where we know that it may be an uphill battle to get this exact bill passed in this legislative context, but what are the pieces of this framework that, through uplifting, for example, the need for an ergonomic standard, or why workers need the right to be able to use the bathroom without having to wait and to not face retaliation when they request that, just as two basic minimum provisions that this bill provides, that these are things that can get taken up and adopted in the future. And we want to also fight like hell now to get this passed in this moment. So how can folks on this call join and support that effort? The first is stay tuned. I know that you registered for this webinar, so he'll be following up to everyone that joined, but also through all of our networks. Once the bill is formally introduced, some of the groups on this call are looking for ways to do strategic action to elevate the bill, to reach out to elected officials through petition actions and call-in actions. And those will be things that some of our groups will be pulling together in the coming days and weeks, and we would love to share that with you and ask to stay tuned. And then I think the other way to just be supporting immediately is to please follow Venceremos and follow World Community Workers Alliance is organizing. And as Magali mentioned, workers have been striking. Axel, workers filed lawsuits. They did public petitions in Milan, and the need to amplify those fights on a day-to-day basis is always there. So just really want to encourage folks who are on this webinar to follow that organizing, and there's always a new call to action that comes from workers directly for support.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sonia. And thank you everyone on the panel, everyone who shared their insight, their wisdom, and all of their experience putting all of this work together over the pandemic. I know it hasn't been easy and it's taken a lot of effort for y'all, and just grateful for you. We're going to take this time now to open it up for questions. If you have questions, please drop them into the chat. I do want to know if there are any speakers who want to add anything, who have any questions. Or anything they want to share? Okay, yeah, Jose.
Yeah, just one really quick thing that I want folks to be aware of because of the dynamic that we're in. That this is a lot of back and forth, right? That when the pandemic started, as early as February and March, there were wildcat strikes and independent worker actions, and that prompted a response by the industry. So in April, the industry put out these one-page letters in all US papers and lobbied the Trump administration to put out this executive action that came out on April 28th, the executive order that's under the Defense Production Act that was supposedly to prevent shortages of meat. But now we know that a lot of that meat, about 60% of that meat produced during that quarter was actually exported, right? But then that prompted a response that got a lot of our allies and everyone else that we just heard organized, and that is eventually what led to this bill. So we're not done yet, right? Like we're at the beginning of this fight, and this bill, as imperfect as it is, it's the best thing we have, and that there are definitely ways to both improve this bill and for all of you who are on this webinar to participate in making that bill better and to pushing the industry in the right direction.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you so much. Any last words from our panel? All right. I think we
I just probably said something last that I want to let the people know that this bill actually contains workers' voices, because workers' voices are included in this. Every single question that Brent or Suzanne or Sonia been asking to me when drafting the bill, I actually came back and get a feedback also from the workers. So this is actually basically we are just the bridges passing the word for this.
Axel, would you help us answer one of these questions that was in the chat? So someone it's kind of connected to this. People wanted to know how folks from the industry had input towards structuring this bill. How are they involved?
Well, in our end, I mean, it's here with RCWA, we always do work directly with the workers. I mean, we are only bridges, only there, pass the voice, but in every single question that I get asked, I go back to them. We have a council up here formed by meat processing plant workers, and they are the ones that actually pretty much put the voice or the things. For example, in things when when we were talking about the bathroom breaks and how the bill should talk about that, they are the ones that telling me, okay, this is happening to us in this way. The company is doing this, but this is what we need. So that's the way how we bring this a discussion. So there is not much time that actually I can go in deeper details here, but definitely these questions and all of this is something that we are bringing completely to the workers to out there in Milan. We meet in Milan. We have conversations by phone with those that didn't attend meetings or something. But I always, wherever the information that I pass is based in workers' opinions. So basically, it's the workers that always are telling me, "Hey, this can work, and this cannot work." So that's how it is.
Great, thank you so much for that
welcome.
context. Jose, I heard you mention this a little bit, how this bill is a little bit of imperfect, and anyone who wants to answer this question sure can jump in on that. But what are some ways that you think this bill could be improved?
Yeah, I actually would cede that question to Axel and Magali because they know that better. All I know is that instead of framing it in terms of just line speed, that we could frame it in terms of how many times the worker has to do something. But Magali and Axel, please feel free to answer that question. Or not.
Okay, I'll go. You know, right now, the existing laws, for example, is if we talk, since you were talking about speed of line, Jose, I'm going to get deeper in this. Now, for example, right now, the speed of line is being regulated by USDA, but it's only if it represents a threat for the meat, they can reduce it. But in the sense that I'm going to put you at this example. A company, they can kill, let's say up here, they are killing 10,500 pigs in less than 8 hours. And they can reduce their workforce if they want. They want to get their production done, but there is not a stipulation how many workers in how many hours and how many pigs are they going to be killed. So that means if the speed of line is being regulated by the number of animals being killed, but it's not regulating how many cuts the workers can do. And that's what is actually regarding the ergonomics, for example, or repetitive motion. So repetitive motion is actually not being regulated by law. It is just, and it's something that the workers are needing, because in some cases, the company can bring carcasses from other plants and put it on the conveyor belt, and are animals that are not being killed here, but it's still production that is going to be done. That means there are still cuts that the workers have to do. That's one thing. Bathroom breaks, for example. Now, bathroom breaks, the regulations are that, yes, they have to, the companies need to have facilities in their buildings. That means in the infrastructure, but there is nothing that regulates how many times a worker can take a bathroom break. That's why we hear in many cases that workers are soiling or peeing on their selves or defecating, because there is nothing to force the company to allow the workers to take bathroom breaks. So they can say, okay, we are giving a bathroom, we are giving breaks because it's on a schedule break. But I think this bill can address that kind of things. So I don't know if that answers actually the question.
It really does, and it gives us a lot of context that definitely seems like it was missed. Magali, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that what can be improved is the process of compliance, the reinforcement mechanisms of the laws, because they are very vague and they need to be more clear about that. So I would just, because that the process of putting in place and regulating and monitoring that is very important. A law that doesn't have the teeth to pursue a change doesn't really bring that change. And even though in some parts it has that, it needs a more specific improvement on that.
Great, thank you. So we have one question. It's a 3-part question of who are the main organizers? What is your strategy, and what are some opportunities to support? So we have kind of answered what are some opportunities to support earlier. And the folks who are here, I would like to say are some of the main organizers, but anyone else want to add folks who might not be here, who definitely were part of helping this bill come to pass and who worked with you all?
So what was the first question, or there are 2 questions?
Yeah. Who are the main organizers, and what is your strategy?
The main organizers, so.
Towards the bill?
Oh,
I'm
okay.
assuming?
I could jump
Wait,
in
maybe,
and just
oh, sorry, go ahead.
say that, our organizations here on this call offered input through the connections we have through our member bases and through the connections with workers, as Magali and Axel mentioned. But we know that there was also other organizations, many other organizations that are working with poultry workers and meat processing workers. So, UFCW was also very involved. And when the bill was announced, there was a really broad group of labor, food justice, and animal rights groups that were all endorsers of the bill. So I think there's a broad coalition of groups that see this as important. And I think that'll be really, really key for trying to use this momentum and moment that we've been describing, just in terms of talking about it's certainly not just the folks that are presenting today, but we know that there's a lot of consensus that this is needed and the direction forward.
Great, thank you, Sonia. So we do have a general question in the chat about the bill number and the title, and I'm pretty sure that will be dropped in the email that we're going to send out to everyone who registered. We're going to send out more information to everyone. But I want to know from the panel, are there any other questions you have for each other, or anything else you want to add that's really important about this moment?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, I do think it's important to re-emphasize, I think, what both Magali and Axel has said, which is that the folks who are here have been in constant communication with workers and shaping this bill. And that there's also a whole constellation of other organizations, not just us, that have been working to make this a reality, including large labor unions, but a lot of small worker centers in Iowa and Idaho, all over the country, right, who have been in communication directly with Senator Booker's office, or in communication with us, and we've been relaying that information back to Senator Booker's office. And then the other thing that I just wanted to add is that you are hearing a lot of different tactics that folks have been using, and some of that includes, strikes and worker walkouts and lawsuits and op-eds and petitions and more. It's not just one tactic, right? It's a lot of stuff. And so that's what we want to make sure that we emphasize here, that this is going to be a long haul, and we are going to be in this fight for a while. And we want to invite all of you, right, to be part of that fight, because regardless of what you do well, trust me, there's room for you in this fight.
Thanks, Jose. It seems like we have a few more questions that came in through the chat. Folks want to know how long this bill has been in the works and how much it has evolved through the process and the time in history. So how long has it been in the works, and what has been the process?
I suppose I'll take this question. But before I answer it, I just want to say that, you know, today, for all the people on the webinar, today is Giving Tuesday. And I really hope that you are inspired by what you've heard from the leaders on this webinar, and that you donate to Heal Food Alliance, to Food Chain Workers Alliance, to Venceremos, to the Rural Community Workers Alliance, because they are doing this hard organizing work on the ground and need resources to build more power. So please donate what you can. The idea for the bill sort of came up even before the election, and work began in earnest after the new Congress came together. So sort of in like March or so, I think we really started working on it. And you know, how has it evolved? It just evolved. There were a lot of different organizations that were working on it, like Sonia said, you know, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, National Employment Law Center, or no, National Employment Law Project, excuse me. And of course, these organizations, there was a Family Farm Action, there were farmer-based organizations working on it. So evolved different parts, and it just sort of came together. There were a lot of iterations, and a lot of, at least on our side, going back to grassroots organizations like Venceremos and Rural Community Workers Alliance to get input on what the priorities were. You know, we weren't deciding what was going to be in the bill. It really did, like Axel said, it really did come from a tremendous amount of worker input.
Great, thanks so much. So we are currently at time for questions, and I know we had a few more to kind of get to. And I just want to thank everyone on the panel and everyone who participated in this webinar. And I'm going to pass it to Navina to kind of offer up any next steps.
Sure, thanks. Thank you everyone for joining today. As we mentioned, we'll follow up with all of the resources, the links that folks have dropped, and more information about this bill in particular. But just want to say, like has been mentioned over and over again, that something like this, when you see a potential policy or piece of legislation, doesn't come out of nowhere, right? It's not because some like person who is like way up there in power is just like, oh, here's a great idea. Like, it happened because of all of the work that the folks that you're hearing from have been doing, not just in the last 20 months, but for years and years, and building on, you know, generations of work that folks have done to fight for dignity and safety and respect for the people who are sustaining all of us in so many ways. So just really want to give deep bows of appreciation, particularly to Axel and Magali for all of the work that you are doing, like every day, making sure that the people that you are in community with like have that safety and protection. And we're grateful to, you know, be able to be in alliance with you and to be building movement together. And just for like a taste of how folks' different skills have come into play, as Brent mentioned, you know, he comes from the legal perspective, so he's been helping with that. Some of our folks are excellent writers, so they're writing op-eds or doing social media. Some folks donate, some folks make food for workers who are striking. Like, there's all different roles for everybody to play in making something like this possible. And we will follow up with you with a call to action, which will primarily be around how we make sure that this bill, which has been announced, actually starts moving through the legislative process. So we're hoping that we can get some of our electeds from all over the country to be supporting this bill and making these protections for workers a reality, and really looking at that consolidation across the industry. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here with us. Sonia, Suzanne, Brent, Jose, Magali, Axel, Marlene for moderating us, Rosie for doing all of the tech. Yeah, we will be in touch with all of you soon. Thank you.